Hey, common scientists. We're coming to you this week with the topic of nature. So, nature is pretty broad. Maybe some of you thought of the Entity magazine, and maybe some of you are thinking of the last time you've been outside. Maybe some of you are like, next podcast, I hate nature. Being outside isn't my thing. Hopefully, whichever category you fall into, you find out a little bit of something about nature and about our experiences with nature. So, as a reminder, this is the Common Science Cast. That means that we all do some research, we bring our research to the table, and we discuss and learn from one another through conversation in the vein of common science. So, I'm going to kick it to Dre to start off this week for a quote about nature.
Yep, so I got a quote from Mahatma Gandhi, coming in Mahat. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. But so Gandhi said to forget to forget. Okay, I gotta look through it. To forget how to dig the earth and tend the soil is to forget ourselves.
One more time.
To forget how to dig the earth and tend the soil is to forget ourselves.
So why do we go with that quote?
So Dre had a list of quotes, and that was the one that I thought was the most thought-provoking to me. Given our discussion before this cast, we were talking about how much screens are around in our lives and how many hours we spend on screens. And like I myself couldn't tell you the last time I grew my own vegetable. I don't know about you guys, but like that's just like where I was thinking when I heard that quote.
Yeah, I have a plant in my house. It's like a pothos or something, and it's like impossible to kill. Like you can forget to water it for like a month. It's so hard to kill, and it still has got like some dead leaves on it because I have forgotten how to dig the earth and tend the soil, for sure. And I think that obviously, I think the quote is pretty straightforward. I think most people, at least in modern America today, would agree that we're definitely missing something, right? We're missing something by not being out there. It was funny. I was talking to one of my students, and he was talking about he had a cousin that lived in the same apartment complex as him, and he never knew. And he was talking about how kids in his community don't go outside. And I was like, huh, that's so interesting. Like, as a kid, we didn't have phones or anything. We had, like, consoles, obviously. But at the end of the day, like, you went outside in your cul-de-sac or your apartment complex, you knocked on doors, and then you all just, like, played football or soccer or basketball or tag or snowball fights, anything. Mm-hmm. Just hung out, like, got into trouble. You just did that. And he's like, yeah, no, like, now we all just, like, play Fortnite and talk to our friends online and Snapchat. And I was just like, wow, like that's like you didn't even know that you had a cousin that lived in your complex because no one's ever outside. That's so bizarre.
I would take it a step further to say that I think especially for young boys, if there's not an agenda, and this is kind of what I've heard from my younger two brothers, one is like in his 20s and one is in his teens, that like it's weird for them. Like, if they want to hang out with the bros, there's got to be a, like, planned Fortnite or, like, something.
Oh, really?
If they're going to do, like, if they're going to hang out, there has to be something like that, or it's weird. Or it's, like, a gay invitation.
Yeah, that makes sense because, not the gay part, but the rest of it made sense because if you're going to just do nothing, there's never a point now where a kid would have to do nothing. They all have cell phones, unlimited games on their phones, and limited access to the internet. So there's never a point where you would just sit around with your friends and do nothing anymore. I guess I can be at home on my phone, like melting in my brain and being completely engaged for the next 4 hours doing nothing on my phone versus just sitting here and like, hey, what do you guys want to do? Don't know. Like, and now we're all awkwardly just on our phones. Like, that's really interesting. I hadn't really heard that, but that does make sense that you have to have a plan now. That was the plan. Just like get together and figure something out. That was the plan growing up. Oh, wow.
It seems like a sad existence. I just have great memories of, and I lived out in the boonies, like 35 minutes from school or the nearest grocery store. Well, there's one closer, but like the nearest Walmart. And in the United States, that's like a big deal if you live that far from Walmart. Anyways, um, yeah, like getting together, I grew up on a lake, so all summer long, like people you'd see them on the boat, we'd wave, and then they'd come over and we'd hang out the rest of the afternoon. Or
Yeah.
like, yeah, people would come out and we would make forts in the woods all day long, like all day long. Or Bjorn and my youngest brother, he would fish all day long and like come in and be like, Mom, I'm starving. And she's like, it's not on me. Did you eat breakfast or lunch? And he's like, oh no, I've been outside all day. Like things like that. It seems sad that that's not happening as often, or maybe not at all in some scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going back to our boredom cast too, there's something to being bored with your friends with nothing to do, nothing to distract you, because that's how you get creative. That's how you build the treehouse. That's how you make up a new game. That's how you talk about life and discover each other and make plans when you get older and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, we want to do this or be this when we're together. Or we're going to be best friends forever because of this. But, because like you talked about, like boredom is the birth of creativity. Once you're bored, your brain doesn't know what to do. It has to get creative to get rid of that boredom. But now there's never really a true boredom because there's always something to distract you. And that does seem like a detriment to our current society. I know it's impacted me a ton, for sure. I've been noticing it a lot lately. I'm just like, I know why I'm not writing more. I know why I'm not having more creative thoughts. I know why I'm not having more creative ways of how to do this or make money or whatever. It's because I always have something going through my brain. There's always a song or a podcast or a video essay. There's always something going through my head. And I'm never just quiet.
Yeah, I recently decided to, I now, my phone, I had already had like a time limit on my YouTube
Mm-hmm.
and so it was like a 5-minute time limit on anything like social media. YouTube, I recently learned some people consider social media, but I gave it a 10-minute time limit. And then I had like a 30-minute time limit on my Chrome on my phone because I just can read articles for days. I recently deactivated almost all of my apps besides like texting and phone calling before noon
Mm-hmm.
each day. And that has actually done wonders for my productivity, I've found in the last week since I've done it. And yeah, there are definitely moments where I feel like bored in the morning now, because before I was like, I would wake up and I would just like listen to
Mm-hmm.
a podcast or a quick video or something.
Yeah, have that dopamine stream.
But now it's like, yeah, I'm just like, I wake up and I'm a little bored and
yeah,
like, okay, what am I going to actually do with my time?
yeah. Talking with the day-to-day avoidance of technology or screens and going outside, I think there is something to like just outside kind of being a little bit boring if you live in the city. But do you guys find nature to be boring?
No, I find nature to be boring, or no, I don't find nature to be boring, but I do want to back up a little because I will not ever forget the boredom cast, and I'm going to quote you, Dre, and I dare you to go back and find it because I know it's there. Boredom is a lack of character. Quotes. That is what you said. And you guys are talking about boredom like it's a positive thing.
Yes, I did say that. And I think so that quote, going back to our freedom and responsibility podcast, when you are a philosopher like Sartre, sometimes you have to make these
Did
very...
you just call yourself when you are basically Sartre?
Sometimes you just have to say things like a powerful statement like you are condemned to freedom. So I made a powerful statement. Boredom is a character flaw. Yes, there can be some, what do you call those, like appendix, right? There could be an appendix of that where, and I did talk about this in the cast, where I said it's more of like I'm not squandering, what's what I'm looking for, but like where you're just like lingering in it. that, I think, as opposed to just feeling it. Because then if you can get yourself to get creative and get out of it, then great, fantastic. A lot of amazing things come from that. But if you're just like wallowing in it and you're just like people who tell me I'm bored, that's how I know you're wallowing in it.
Fair.
Like you would never know I'm bored because I would change something.
I appreciate the context.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up. That's hilarious. Yeah, no, because that's literally like that's like my favorite quote ever that I've ever said. I'm like, yeah, bored character flaw. So I appreciate that.
It was one of my favorites too. Really. I mean, it really stuck with me now. Every time I've been bored, I'm like, fudge. My character is flawed. I need to be on board. Anyways, no, I love my time in nature. I don't feel bored. I feel ironically very free in nature. I feel free from the pressures of this world. I really enjoy the freedom of being away from mirrors. I enjoy the freedom. Why was that funny?
Because I was thinking about like lakes and Walden. I was like, just don't look in a very clear lake, I guess. Don't be around any lakes.
It's pretty distorted view, but
all right, my bad.
You're good. And I think a lot of the experiences in nature, at least for me, it's often when I'm like remote backpacking, and so there's often also not really cell service, and there's also often a purpose and a lot of putzing, which is like, I mean, just there's a lot that goes into backpacking, like keeping your stuff in a compact space that fits into your backpack, and then packing it all up and then bringing it to a new location, and then like unpacking it. And for me too, it's my nature.
Firewood,
yeah, like
getting water.
Right, all the things, and that takes up a lot of time. And so even when, for me, my experience in nature is quite active, and like a lot of that becomes quite mindless, and so I'm not ever bored. And there too, my mind has the opportunity to wander and to have like new thoughts and creative ideas and self-exploration. I question and probably do a lot of like my own talk therapy in my head, kind of like, why do I feel this? What am I struggling with? And a lot of that happens in nature better than anywhere else. And for me too, a lot of that happens when I am physically active, and that generally also happens outside. So a lot of those things go together for me.
I don't feel bored in nature. And I think so. It sounds kind of middle-age or retiree like, but birding can make for a more enriching experience. But outside of that too, just like I do enjoy being with my thoughts, and I do feel as if I can more intentionally be with them when I'm on a walk in the woods without my phone on me. Like I can actually meditate on whatever it is that I'm trying to work through. Whereas, I mean, if I'm in my home, even if it's not my phone or my computer on me, it's like, oh, I think about the dishes, or I think about whatever it is. Like there's other pieces and cues that like distract my mind. Whereas when I'm in the woods, there's like that feels like it melts away, and I can really just be present with my thoughts and be more intentional with them. But yeah, so no, I wouldn't say I'm bored in nature.
I think there's two different things, or at least two different things that happen when you're in nature. There's number one, because you're not so distracted by technology, your brain is being utilized more effectively for things that you probably find more meaningful, right? Thinking up a new game plan for something, thinking about your relationship, filtering through your feelings, whatever it might be. But then there's also just this cathartic and sort of sublime feeling that you just get from being in nature. It's not like, oh, I have all this time now to do this, where I'm being active. It's like, no, I feel good because I'm around trees. I feel
Mm-hmm.
good because I can hear a river, because I'm looking at an ocean.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that just feels good about that. What do you guys make of that? That being in nature just feels good.
I mean, I think of some of the science of being surrounded by green and or like water, and know that like technically endorphins are being released, and endorphins are like the chemicals that make us perceive or feel happiness. So I think of that. I also sometimes think of like historically, I would bet that for most of human history we didn't live in like boxed structures with just like little windows. Like I would bet that it has been more integrated with nature for a longer period of time if you were looking at the timeline of history. I'm guessing Aidan could speak to that better than I can. But that makes me think that being where we're at today, especially where I think a lot of people spend a lot of time in boxes, and when I say boxes, I'm like referring to homes or apartments or offices or whatever it is, that when you do finally get outside or into a place where nature is around you, like your whole self just like evolutionarily is like, oh my God, this is where I'm built to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so, yeah, as far as the being in nature being beneficial, uh, there was a book I read a while back that was that talked about um, nature and education, and how and it was by this physical therapist, I believe, and how a lot of children learn to be more coordinated by climbing trees, and uh, like it would help them just figure that out neurologically and and physiologically. And I think that like there are kind of there are tangible benefits to nature in that regard. Obviously, people can say, "Oh, you could get on a jungle gym though," and things like that. But I do think it's like there is something to do with like the the presence that comes with nature, in that like yeah, the modern day hyper-connectedness kind of melts away. And from what Lauren was talking about like most of human history, we are kind of operating off of like evolution takes millennia, and like we've only had digital information technology for a blink of our history, and like our bodies are not really designed to interface with that. And
I
so,
told my students that one day, like in way less nice terms. I was like, I don't remember what it was, but they were calling me old. And I was like, first of all, I'm not old. But second of all, like, when you guys are my age, or maybe a little older, when you guys are all 30 or 40, you're all going to have carpal tunnel. All of you are going to be half blind and probably unhappy. I think I just threw that in there because I was pissed. But like, like I was thinking of just what some of the consequences of this use of technology might be. And the first thing that came to my mind was there are troves of children operating on Chromebooks, which are tiny, and their hands, like by the time you're 16, you're fairly full grown. Like, and I would bet your hands and your feet are pretty full grown at 16. Like, you're operating on this tiny little thing without a mouse, and we know that using a mouse, like, can be helpful for your hand health and your joints. I mean, I don't know. There are some things, like, that I can imagine, like you said, Aidan, if this has only been around for a blink of an eye in the course of human history, we're going to really see detrimental effects potentially. The blue light thing, I don't know. Like, are screens really going to make us blind? I don't know. And I didn't actually do much research on that for the purposes of this cast, but I focused more on like how beneficial nature can be, but I can imagine there just will be some major health effects. If I were to guess.
Did you guys look at any statistics on how much time per year we should spend in nature?
So I didn't look at any actually in anticipation of this cast. I have heard though that like it's at least like 1 hour a week
Of nature
can
bathing.
have of like nature bathing where you're completely no phone and you're like on a walk in nature or whatever. Just it like can have huge health impacts.
Yeah, that's honestly such a small ask. It's unreal.
Right.
Like
And,
1
like-
hour, that's it. So
But didn't you say something about like a weekend a month?
Yeah, or spending like if you spend
Oh.
like that was the other suggestion is like 1 to 2 days a month. If you were disconnected, it can have, I mean, just huge health benefits in terms of lowering blood pressure and all sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, like you said, it's not a big ask.
yeah, I need to do that. I don't ever go into nature. Like I only do it if it's like, oh, like a group of us are gonna do something in nature, or like Em and I are gonna go do something in nature. But it's not like, you know what, I'm just gonna go get my hike 30 minutes out of town. It's like, nope, I'm just gonna be in the gym, dark, no windows, on a treadmill. I do not spend enough time in nature at all. But you know who did?
Who?
Henry David Thoreau. So, transition. There is this book by one of the most amazing thinkers and writers of all time, Henry David Thoreau. That's a fact. It's called Walden. Walden is a pond that Henry David Thoreau, while he was constructing and kind of bringing together his political theories and trying to convince America. When did he live? Like maybe like 100 years ago? Late 1800s?
I think it was late 1800s.
He's trying to convince America, hey, this industrial route, this very like confined indoor life with all these facades and symbolisms, like this is not the route to go. So he gets up off his friend's couch. I think it was Bernard Shaw or one of those smart, Frank Lloyd Wright, some smart guy, gets up off his couch and he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go build a cabin on this pond and then I'm going to live there for 2 years. And I'm going to do nothing but like read books and hang out in nature. And, this kind of Protestant work ethic where you work really hard for 6 days and then you take 1 day off, I'm going to flip that. And I'm going to work really hard for 1 day and I'm going to take 6 days off and hang out in nature and read books and think. And he was out to write his little manifesto. And it was a big manifesto. It was really important. But
Can I
go ahead.
interject just to say, like, not that long ago, my mom was like trash talking, not really, but kind of. My little sister, she's taking a month off. Like,
Just 1 month, out of the
she
year.
works
1
her
month.
butt off, and she's taking a month off to go visit her boyfriend in Honduras. So she doesn't see that often. Like, I think soup makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, sounds awesome.
And like, my mom was like, "Oh, if I had ever taken a month off when I was in my 20s, like, unheard of."
Walden took 2.
Right. So I'm just laughing because it's so
Thoreau
right. It
took
goes
2.
against our nature, against our American ideals.
Yes, our second nature.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, he did this for 2 years, the whole 1 day on, 6 days off thing. And he found himself meditating, thinking, experiencing nature. He had a quote where he said, I want to live my life like the animals do. He read books and he essentially was near constant solitude. He did have obviously some animal friends, and I think he did have a couple of visitors throughout the couple of years, but essentially he was in solitude. And there's a lot of quotes like this where these thinkers, they're like, the tree that grows by itself, if it grows at all, grows strong. I think that's like a Churchill one, right? Right. It's like if you're strong, you grow by yourself, you get big. Like there's these ideas that solitude is helpful, which is, I think, obviously too much of a good thing is tough because we are gregarious creatures. I think maybe David Thoreau was on the spectrum of like more independent, more. I don't think he was an introvert, but I think he just has that type of brain that he can spend that amount of time alone. So I don't know how most people do it 2 years in solitude, even if it was in nature. It might be pretty tough. But that one woman did, who wrote Wild. What's her name? Sherry something.
Mm.
She was in hiking for a while, like a year, right? So she got up and dropped everything for her job, and she was pretty much like a mental breakdown, like was like depressed, all that stuff, and she just was like, I'm about to hike up like that mountain range in California. I'm uneducated swine, so I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
then she was out there trying to live, like build fires, run away from bears, like she was really out there, and that changed her life, and that really sent her on a trajectory. And we've heard this time and time again, right? Like not a ton of people do it, but we've heard enough stories like this where someone uproots their life of like this cubicle life or this rat race or whatever you want to call it, this American dream chasing where you're in the city day in and day out grind. And whether it's you go hang out at a pond like Walden Lake for a year or two, or you go on this like 6 month backpacking thing where you're in nature every day, 12 hours a day, and almost always they come back with this life-changing story and this new perspective on life and this new purpose. So,
Quit your job.
yes.
Leave your family.
Yes.
Go to the woods.
American dream is a lie.
And run from bears.
Yes, run from bears. So some big ideas from Henry David Thoreau's Solitude.
I'm joking, though. I just want to say that if you quit your job and you say, I told you so, I'm not telling you so. I'm just sorry. I had to.
No, I hear you.
Okay.
Yeah, but not, you know.
I'm not claiming that responsibility. I'm responsible for everyone except for you if you make that decision.
So some big takeaways: solitude aids in purity, or like the freedom of the mind. Self-reliance, right? So you're out there in nature. It's important to be able to provide for yourself, to not rely on all these systems, to not rely on social constructions, to not rely on your job, right? Like, yes, you can use these things to provide some sort of meaning in your life, but don't be dependent on it, right? And then also, nature is more conducive to learning. That was a huge thing that a huge proponent he had, whether it be him just out in nature learning or him even just being around nature while reading a book. He just thought when you're in nature, it's more conducive to learning. And I think that has a lot of promise in it for sure, and a lot of, I think, scientific evidence over the years to back that up. And there's this whole kind of, not genre, but school of thinking of like kids learning through play, right? And like why our school systems are so bad, and why recess is so important, and why we should be engaging kids in more physical activity when we're teaching them. And obviously only a few schools do it. It has to be kind of a alternative school or some sort. But I think having David Thoreau was really a big like impetus in starting that line of thinking. And as the industrial movement got here and we kind of said, hey, like now more people have jobs, now more people have homes, now more people have food, now more people can do this. And then women got into the workforce and all this stuff. And he was just like, hey, like, but this is what we're really about. All these machines, all this dead stuff that we're around every day, all these symbols that don't really mean anything, money that you can't eat money, right? Your social status, what is that? Like, what does this job really mean? What does that title, executive marketing operator, what does that mean? That means nothing.
The newest bed frame.
The newest bed frame.
That was a recent debacle in a relationship.
So what nature is conducive to learning. I know you guys do spend some time backpacking and stuff like that, or I think you guys call it something else, but what are a lesson you guys have learned within the last 6 months or so out in nature that stuck with you? And maybe you didn't learn it, maybe it was just like a reminder.
Check and double check the map before you go on a trip. I don't know.
I mean, that's good, right? It's
like
a metaphor. It's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Double check the map.
Double check the map.
But in that, like, I think travel with a companion who you're happy, like, hiking an extra 5 miles with.
Or
I mean,
12.
But that's what I'm saying. Like,
Check the map.
But seriously, like, whether it's, I mean, in life, or you think of it as a metaphor, but literally, like, we were on this hike, and Aidan thought it was going to be 8 miles, and it was 12 miles, and, like, 2 of those miles were up a huge ravine, and, like, yeah, I mean, you should do life with someone who you know, like, man, on an 8-mile day or a 12-mile day, when you fuck up on reading the map, I still am gonna choose you.
That's deep.
Yeah.
That was learning.
That's a learning. Yeah, I would echo the double check the map and choose wisely when it comes to your backpacking partner and life partner. I think too.
Nature taught him that.
I think too, just the problems that I or we face in the day-to-day kind of minutia of like what Henry David Thoreau is talking about in terms of like the job and the apartment and the furniture and all of that. It's pretty small in the grand scheme of things. And when you get out and see the stars in a remote area, and you can see the whole sky of, I mean, just thousands, millions, trillions, however many stars and galaxies. I mean, yeah, it's a humbling experience for sure. And I mean, so that's humbling, the star piece of it, but then also just like, man, I am the one, the self-reliance piece, like I am the one who has got to get me from here to like that 32 miles later to get back to the car, because if not, like, what, I'm just gonna be in the woods. I'm not getting home. Like, like that message, that like, that was another, I mean, I guess big takeaway was just, yeah, like I've got to do it. I've got to take it one step at a time, and I'll get there, but I've got to do it.
I would say too, for me, knowing that no one is coming, like when you're on mile 16 out of 30, like, you know, no one is coming also if you get hurt. Like, taking care of yourself at mile 16 is as important, if not more important, than taking care of yourself at mile 1 or mile 36. And like, I think that also could be quite a metaphor, because I think people are hard on their bodies sometimes, and they think like, oh, I'm young, or oh, I'm whatever. And like, yeah, at the end of the day, like, only you are going to take you to 85. So like, do yoga or whatever else you need to do so that you can still take care of your body when you're 85. Because yeah, like at mile 16, no one's coming for me, no one's coming for Aidan. And so like, every step I took was conscientious, because if I effed up my ankle or if something happened, and for me especially, like, I carry a pack that weighs more than half of my weight. If I step wrong and slip, I would not be okay. So it's like, every step I take is super conscientious. And in that, if I'm going ahead of Aidan and I step on something that's like wobbly, like, I am also letting him know I have a ton of agency about like how I'm using my body and how I'm moving my body and how I'm standing with 80 pounds on my back, and how I'm like, all of everything, every step, every movement feels so conscientious. And like, I think that message too is really helpful when I go home. It's like, as soon as I take off the 80-pound pack, I'm also thinking like, am I still standing straight? Am I, you know, like, what are the steps I'm taking now? Are they still okay? Like, and it's also good practice, it has been for me, to look back and be like, oh, Aidan, like, there's something here, like, or look out for this. Because I think often, like, I am prone to be self-serving. Like if I find something out, or like if there's toilet paper out in the bathroom and a stranger walks in, like how common would it be that you would say something to them? But like hiking for me has also showed me like this agency of like the people around you. Is like if you realize something, you should let another person know. I don't know if that made a ton of sense, but
It does make sense. So, as Thoreau said, one of the most important things about him spending time in Walden, about us spending time in nature, is that we're confronted with reality. We're grounded. These are the things that are actual necessities. So, like you're saying, if something goes wrong on a big hike, you could die. Less likely, but, or not that very likely, but you could also just get seriously hurt or just hurt for a long period of time, right? There is a real danger in, yes, you did kind of construct that danger, right? Because you didn't have to do that. But now that you're out there in nature, you're reminded, oh, nature's dangerous. It's dangerous to be out. There's a reason why we created houses. Because nature's dangerous. Like, don't get it twisted. Like, you can die out here. And because you are actually faced with, whether it be death or just some level of danger, maybe just a great discomfort, because you are faced with that and it's right in your face, a lot of times you're not thinking about anything else. You're thinking about that next step, at least once it gets to the 16th mile, right? You're just thinking about the next step. You're not daydreaming anymore. You're just like, I just need to do one step after another, make sure I don't slip, make sure I don't do this, make sure I don't overexert myself, make sure I drink enough water. So you're just thinking about the next step. And that's very evolutionarily how we're built to think. And it's very cathartic. It's very meditative because you're very mindful. You're just in the moment. You're in the moment, and you're getting that physical and mental meditation. And then that's how you can really form, specifically if you do it like you guys seem to be doing it a little bit more ritualistically now. If you're doing that once a month, whatever, now you can start reprogramming, rewiring those grooves and start forming some better thinking habits, like you said. It could be simple, like, oh, like, am I standing straight? Like, what's going on? Like, am I like bending my knees in? Like, what am I doing with my body? That's going to lead me to a more successful, healthier, longer life.
Yeah, I think so. One thing that just I was reminded of when you're talking about the danger in the houses and remembering like why we have these. Man, I was glad that we have running water when I got home, because every time you have to get water, it's like you gotta hike down to the river, get a jug of it, like, and then gravity filter it. And anyways, yeah, I just had thought about that when you were talking about the remembering why we have houses piece. As far as the thinking in terms of the next step, that's something that I need consistent reminding of. And I definitely need consistent reminding of, because sometimes I'm just wired to kind of optimize and try to plan ahead. And I mean, just that is a message that, I am reminded of when it comes to backpacking. I'm also reminded of on my daily commutes now when I'm biking. I'm biking to and from the U, and that's been super helpful, because it's like, all right pedal, left pedal, right pedal, left pedal. But then it, like you're saying, it just, at the end of the day, probably to sum up all of those feelings, there's a quote by a wise man.
My grandpa.
Lauren's grandpa.
Inch by inch, life is a cinch. Mile by mile, life is a trial. On that note, common scientists, I hope you guys learned a little bit of something about nature. I certainly did. And some of the benefits of nature and some of the things that it could maybe do in your life. And at the very least, maybe some of the conversation pushed you to think a little bit more about your next step.
Hey, common scientists. Hope you enjoyed the cast. Thanks for investing in common science. We hope it brought as much value to you as it did to us.
To learn more, smash the subscribe button and visit our website, commonscientists.com, where you can read our blog, join our email newsletter, and follow us on social media.
Finally, if you like what we have to say, you can absolutely support us on Patreon. We could always use more support. You can navigate there also from our website, commonscientists.com, common scientists with an S, so that we can continue cultivating a community of common scientists.